In the double-slit experiment, light can arrive at a screen one photon at a time, one small impact, then another, each one recorded as a single event in a single place. Ordinary intuition expects a simple story. The photon passed through the left slit or the right slit, and if we place a detector near the slits, we should merely learn more about the same event. More information should sharpen the picture, not change the kind of picture nature is allowed to draw. But that is not what happens. When no path information is collected, many individual impacts slowly build an interference pattern, a sequence of bright and dark bands that looks as if the possible paths have combined and cancelled like waves. When a device physically records which slit the photon passed through, that pattern disappears. The screen no longer shows the same interference structure. The act of finding the path is not a passive glance from a human mind. It is a physical interaction that changes the experimental conditions. Without that deeper mechanism, prediction would fracture. We would be left with particles that arrive as points, but somehow produce a wave pattern, and then lose that pattern precisely when path information becomes available. The central clue is not magic, and it is not consciousness controlling matter. It is contact. Measurement means that a system becomes coupled to something else, and once information about a possibility is physically carried away, the original range of behaviour changes. A strange thought begins there, but it must be held carefully. In quantum physics, observation has a strict physical meaning. In human life, observation has another meaning, the mind noticing its own experience. These are not the same process. Yet both disturb one comfortable belief. Looking is not always passive. The way a system is contacted, or the way an experience is interpreted, can decide what kind of world becomes available. In a quiet human morning, something distant but familiar begins to happen. The room is grey before the day has fully entered it. Not dark, not bright. A soft pressure of the body against the mattress. A small coolness near the face. A sound somewhere in the building. Water in a pipe, a motor outside, cloth shifting against skin. Before the phone is reached, before language fills the room, before the day has a name, there is only experience arriving in pieces. Then a thought appears. It may be small. It may be almost invisible. I am already behind. Something is wrong. I cannot handle today. The room has not physically changed. The light on the wall is the same. The body is lying in the same position. The air has not thickened, yet the nervous system can shift within seconds. The shoulders tighten, the breath shortens. A vague pressure in the chest gains a story. The future, which a moment earlier had no clear shape, begins to take on a colour. Not the physical colour of the world, the emotional colour in which the world will now be encountered. This creates an ordinary puzzle. A thought has no weight you can hold in the hand. It does not move furniture. It does not alter the angle of the sun. Yet when it is believed, it can change pulse, posture, attention, memory, expectation, and the first movement of the day. The change is not supernatural, it is biological. The brain is not just recording reality. It is continuously predicting it, naming it, preparing the body for what it thinks is coming next. The shift happens so quickly that 3 layers often collapse into one. The first layer is direct experience, pressure, sound, light, sensation, a tightening stomach, a tired body. The second layer is thought, a label, an interpretation, a prediction, a judgment. The third layer is belief in the thought, and the third layer is the least visible because it does not feel like one more event in the mind. It feels like reality itself. A tightened stomach is a bodily signal. The sentence, "Something terrible is about to happen," is an interpretation. The body preparing for danger because that interpretation is taken as truth is a deeper event. Heart rate may rise. Attention may scan for threat. The face may harden before anything has happened outside the skin. The problem is not that a thought appeared. A living brain produces predictions constantly. The problem begins when a prediction is no longer recognized as a prediction. This recognition has a name, metacognition. It means that the mind can notice its own thinking. Not only think, but know that thinking is happening. Not only hear a sentence inside, but see it as a mental event that appeared, has a force, has a history, and may not be identical with the world. Metacognition is not mystical. It is part of human attention, self-reflection, and cognitive control. But its consequence can be enormous because it introduces a narrow space where there had seemed to be none. Before that space opens, a thought can behave like transparent glass. We look through it and believe we are looking directly at the world. Once it is noticed, the glass is still transparent, but it is also seen as glass. The scene remains visible. The thought may remain convincing. The body may still react. But the mind has gained one extra piece of information. This is an interpretation. That extra piece may be small, but small distinctions can reorganize an entire experience. I am in danger is different from the mind is predicting danger. I am failing is different from the old story of failure has appeared. He ignored me is different from the thought appeared that he ignored me. These are not tricks of language. They change the relationship between awareness and the content inside awareness. The thought remains present, but it no longer sits alone as the final judge. The same tension now leaves the laboratory and enters the nervous system. The quantum experiment does not prove that thought changes matter. It does not say that the mind collapses reality. Those claims would be far beyond the evidence. But the double-slit experiment gives a disciplined warning about the word observation. To observe is not always to watch without consequence. In physics, observation requires interaction. In psychology, observation can change the relationship to a mental event. The two meanings must not be confused. A photon interacting with a detector is not the same as a person noticing anxiety. A wave function is not a mood. A thought is not a quantum particle. But the analogy can still be useful if it stays within its limits. In both cases, a naive picture breaks. Information is not just a decoration added after the fact. Contact changes the situation. In physics, the contact is material. In the mind, the contact is attentional. The double-slit experiment remains powerful because its setup is simple enough to imagine and precise enough to resist simplification. A source sends light or particles toward a barrier with two narrow openings. Behind the barrier is a screen that records impacts. If tiny objects were merely passing through one slit or the other, the final screen should show two broad bands. If a classical wave passed through both openings, the waves from each slit would overlap, strengthen in some places and cancel in others, producing interference. Photons and electrons do something that does not fit either everyday picture cleanly. They arrive as single detections like particles. Yet when the path is not measured, the accumulated pattern behaves as though amplitudes associated with both paths have interfered. A photon does not arrive as half a dot. The detector does not record a smear of partial existence. It records one event. But the distribution of many such events carries the signature of wave-like probability amplitudes. A probability amplitude is not a probability in the ordinary sense. It is part of the mathematical machinery that lets quantum theory predict where events are likely to be found. Amplitudes have relationships, including phase, and those relationships allow them to reinforce or cancel. Only after amplitudes are combined do we obtain probabilities that can be compared with experimental outcomes. That is why the interference pattern matters physically. It is a trace left by possibilities that were not merely hidden facts in the ordinary way. When a which path detector is added, the situation changes. To know the path, something in the apparatus must end up different depending on which slit the photon or particle passed through. A detector must click here rather than there. A photon may scatter differently. A material system may store a trace. The information has to be embodied somewhere. Once the alternatives become physically distinguishable in that way, the interference that depended on their coherent relationship disappears from the observed pattern. The important point is not that a conscious person now knows something. The important point is that the world has been altered so that the path information exists in principle. A detector left running in an empty laboratory can still change the pattern. A trace that no one reads can still destroy interference. The mind of the scientist is not the mechanism. The mechanism is interaction, correlation, the physical availability of information. This distinction protects the metaphor from becoming false. Popular language often says the observer changes the observed and then quietly replaces the detector with a human gaze. That replacement is not scientifically safe. In physics, the observer can be an apparatus, an environment, a record, or any system that becomes correlated with the measured system. Consciousness is not required for the basic effect. Measurement is not a magical spotlight. It is a physical coupling. Yet the disciplined version is still unsettling. The experiment shows that the type of question asked by the apparatus determines which aspect of the system can appear. If the setup preserves the indistinguishability of paths, interference is visible. If the setup records the path, interference is lost. Nature is not merely hiding an answer that a better look will uncover without cost. The method of contact helps define the phenomenon that can occur. Human experience has its own version of this problem, though it belongs to psychology, not quantum mechanics. Most moments in life are not as clear as they first appear. A message left unanswered can mean many things. A pause in a conversation can mean fatigue, thoughtfulness, irritation, fear, distraction, or nothing important at all. A tight chest can be stress, illness, memory, excitement, exhaustion, hunger, or old alarm returning before language. Direct experience is often incomplete. The mind supplies meaning. The mind does not do this because it is defective. It does it because prediction is part of survival. A nervous system that waited for perfect certainty before reacting would be too slow in a dangerous world. It is often useful to guess quickly, especially when the body senses threat. The cost is that the first interpretation may not be the truest one. It may only be the fastest, the most familiar, or the most connected to older pain. A person walks down a hallway, and someone they know passes without saying hello. The sensory facts are thin. Footsteps, a face, no greeting, a moment already gone. But the mind can fill the gap before the body reaches the next doorway. Perhaps they did not notice. Perhaps they were distracted. Perhaps they were carrying private worry. Perhaps they are upset. Perhaps there is something wrong between us. Perhaps I have done something. Perhaps I am being rejected. These possibilities are not equal in the body, some barely disturb the breath. Others make the chest tighten at once. If the sentence, "They did not see me," takes hold, the body continues walking. If the sentence, "They ignored me," takes hold, the same hallway becomes charged. Shoulders may rise. Attention begins searching memory. Old conversations are reviewed as evidence. The next encounter with that person is already being shaped by a story that may or may not be true. This is the daily version of a narrowing, not a quantum collapse, not a physical wave function in the mind, but a psychological narrowing of meaning. Several interpretations could still be possible, yet one becomes the lived world. Once believed, it changes perception. It tells attention what to notice. It tells memory what to retrieve. It tells the body what to prepare for. The outside event was small, but the inside world reorganizes around it. Psychology calls some of these processes automatic thoughts, cognitive interpretations, and cognitive distortions. An automatic thought is not necessarily false. Its defining quality is that it arrives quickly, often without conscious choice, and carries the feeling of immediate truth. A cognitive distortion is a pattern by which interpretation bends available evidence. Mind reading without enough data, searching only for confirmation, predicting catastrophe, turning one event into a judgment about the whole self, treating feeling as proof. These distortions are not character flaws, they are shortcuts. A brain under pressure uses patterns already learned. If rejection has mattered before, the brain may detect rejection early, even where the evidence is incomplete. If mistakes have been punished, the brain may treat ordinary uncertainty as danger. If affection has been unreliable, a delayed reply may feel like abandonment before any facts are known. The mind is not calmly presenting reality. It is protecting a body according to maps drawn from the past. That protection can become a prison. The sentence, "They ignored me," can lead to withdrawal, and withdrawal can make the other person seem more distant, which then confirms the sentence. The thought, "I will fail," can make a task feel heavier, the body more tense, attention more scattered, and the first difficulty more convincing. The belief sadness means weakness can add shame to sadness and create a second wound around the first. One interpretation becomes an organizing principle for the next layer of experience. This is why the bridge between event and emotion matters. Emotions are often described as reactions to what happens, but very often they are reactions to what the event means. The nervous system does not respond only to the absence of a greeting. It responds to "I have been dismissed." It does not respond only to a full inbox. It responds to "I am failing." It does not respond only to a quiet partner. It responds to "I am being left." Meaning is the bridge. And the bridge is sometimes built so quickly that no one notices crossing it. A careful phrase can be useful here: mental superposition, not as physics inside the head, not as a claim that thoughts are quantum states. The phrase works only as a metaphor for the open phase before one interpretation becomes dominant. A situation can hold several possible meanings. The face in the hallway could belong to a distracted friend, a resentful colleague, a tired parent, a person lost in their own thought. The mind may not know yet, but once one meaning is believed, the others may vanish from immediate experience. They do not vanish from the world. They vanish from access. Attention stops sampling widely. It begins to serve the selected story. Confirmation becomes easier than curiosity. The mind searches for evidence that fits. The body prepares for the world the story predicts. What was once ambiguous begins to feel obvious. This is not irrational in a simple sense. It is efficient. The brain is an organ of action, not a courtroom waiting for all testimony. It needs to move the body, reduce uncertainty, and conserve energy. If every social glance required a full investigation, ordinary life would become impossible. So the mind uses predictions, and predictions can be helpful. The danger begins when prediction hardens into reality before it has been tested. The change is not dramatic from the outside. No flash of insight is required. No life story has to be solved all at once. The shift is smaller and more exact, noticing that a thought is one possibility among others, not automatically the final verdict. That noticing can happen in language. "He ignored me" becomes "the thought appeared that he ignored me." "I cannot handle this" becomes "the mind is predicting that I cannot handle this." "I am a failure" becomes "an old self-judgment has come back." The change may sound slight, but the nervous system receives a different message. A fact leaves no room. A thought can be examined. A verdict closes the space. A mental event can be held. This capacity is sometimes called cognitive diffusion, or decentering. It means that a person can relate to thoughts as thoughts, rather than as direct commands, literal truths, or definitions of the self. Diffusion does not mean arguing with every thought. It does not mean replacing every painful sentence with a cheerful one. It does not mean pretending that distress is unreal. It means loosening the automatic fusion between the sentence and the world. The difference is easy to underestimate until pain is strong. When the thought is mild, calling it a thought is simple. When the thought is tied to old shame, grief, fear, or anger, it may arrive with such physical force that distancing from it feels almost impossible. The body may already be mobilized, the throat may already be tight, the stomach may already be clenched, the thought may feel less like words and more like weather. Even then, precision matters. A thought can be serious without being complete. It can contain part of the truth without containing all of it. It can warn without being allowed to govern. It can point to pain without defining the person who feels it. To see a thought as a thought does not weaken the dignity of the suffering beneath it. It gives suffering a little more room to be understood. That room is not cold detachment. It is not the posture of someone who stands far away from life and refuses to feel. In fact, when thought and reality are less fused, feeling can become clearer. Anxiety can be felt as heat, tightness, speed, images, predictions, and protective impulse. Sadness can be felt as heaviness, tenderness, fatigue, and longing. Anger can be felt as boundary, energy, contraction, and urgency. Each layer becomes more visible when it's not immediately swallowed by the sentence, "This is who I am," or "This is how the world is." The familiar morning returns in a new form. The thought, "I cannot handle today," may still appear. The body may still respond. But if awareness notices the thought, the day has not yet been completely locked by it. There is tiredness, there is a prediction, there is a tightening in the chest. There may be fear. There may also be a next small action, sitting up, drinking water, reading the actual calendar, asking what truly needs to be done first. The thought is present, but it is no longer the whole weather system. In ordinary consciousness, this separation does not usually happen by default. Thoughts arise and quickly attach to the feeling of I. The inner voice speaks as if it were the core of the person. "I want this. I cannot bear that. I always do this. This is what I am." Because the voice is so close, it rarely feels like a voice. It feels like the owner of the house. The mind comments constantly. It judges tone, predicts reactions, rehearses future conversations, reviews old mistakes, prepares explanations, compares the present with memory, and tries to secure belonging. This commentary is not a mistake. Without it, planning, learning, social life, and protection would collapse. The trouble begins when the commentary becomes invisible, like a radio playing in an empty room for so long that the sound is mistaken for silence. When thought is fused with identity, the sentence, "I may fail," becomes, "I am failure." The sentence, "I feel afraid," becomes, "I am unsafe." The sentence, "They might be upset," becomes, "I am unwanted." Language narrows the self. The body then organizes around the narrowed identity. Each new event is filtered through it. Evidence against the story may be missed because the story is no longer felt as a story. It is felt as the structure of reality. This is why metacognition is not merely philosophical. It has practical consequences. If a person is identical with every thought that appears, there is no place from which to examine the thought. But if the thought can be observed, then the person is not completely consumed by its content. Awareness is not an escape from the world. It is the space in which the world, the body, and the mind can be seen with slightly more accuracy. Sometimes that space opens as a single ordinary second. A message goes unanswered. The mind offers a painful interpretation. The body tightens. A reply is almost typed. Then something notices. This is a story forming. Not, this is false. Not, I should not feel this. Just, this is a story. In that second, the old chain is still present, but it is no longer completely invisible. Here the relationship to the mind shifts. The mind does not have to be fought as an enemy. It is doing what it has learned to do: predict, protect, connect fragments, complete missing information. But it can be learned from. The crucial shift is not to erase thinking, it is to regain a relationship to thinking. The difference sounds subtle because the words are simple, but an automatic interpretation can recruit the entire body. A believed thought can organize attention for hours. A self-judgment can alter posture, tone, memory, and action. If one small act of noticing interrupts that chain even briefly, the nervous system has encountered a different possibility. The reaction may still happen, but it is no longer entirely unconscious. There is no need to romanticize this. A person in acute pain may not be able to create space by simply trying. Trauma, illness, exhaustion, grief, and ongoing danger can make the body's alarm systems powerful and reasonable. Sometimes what is needed is safety, help, medical care, rest, protection, or change in the outer world. Awareness is not a replacement for real support, but when conditions allow even a little space, that space matters. Because suffering often comes in layers. There is the first pain, the loss, the threat, the body's signal, the hard event. Then there is the story around the pain. This should not be happening. This means I am broken. This will never end. No one else feels this way. The second layer may not create the first, but it can tighten around it. The mind closes like a fist around a dark stone. and the pressure of the fist becomes part of the pain. To open the fist does not mean dropping the stone or denying its weight. The stone may remain, the grief may remain, the fear may remain, the body may still ache. But the hand no longer has to crush itself around what it carries. This is the difference between pain and the additional suffering created by fusion, resistance, and identity. The difference is not absolute, and it is not easy, but it is real enough to change how a person lives through a difficult hour. The same structure appears in rumination. The mind returns again and again to the same scene, often with the feeling that it is solving something. Why did that happen? What did it mean? What should I have said? What if everything had gone differently? Rumination looks like problem solving from the inside, but often it does not produce a step. It keeps the nervous system in contact with a threat or wound while giving the illusion of control. Metacognitive awareness can expose the loop. Instead of entering the 10th replay of the conversation, the mind can notice replaying itself. The scene may continue, the emotion may continue, but the process has been seen. The mind is trying to get certainty from something that may not give certainty. That observation does not magically settle the issue. It may, however, loosen the compulsion to keep turning the same handle after the door is already open or not open. This is where the word acceptance is often misunderstood. Acceptance does not mean approval. It does not mean passivity. It does not mean agreeing with harm or giving up on change. In a psychological sense, acceptance means allowing present experience to be recognized accurately enough that one can respond to it. If sadness is present, fighting the fact that sadness is present often adds strain. If fear is present, shame about fear may add a second alarm. If pain is present in the body, catastrophic interpretation may increase tension around it. Acceptance begins by separating the layers. Here is the sensation, here is the emotion, here is the thought about the emotion, here is the impulse to escape, here is the belief that this should not be happening. Once the layers are distinguished, the experience may still be hard, but it is no longer a single solid mass. It has texture, and texture allows response. This distinction also protects the practice from becoming another form of self-blame. The point is not to say that all suffering is caused by thoughts. That would be false and cruel. The point is that thoughts often shape how suffering is carried. They can intensify it, interpret it, prolong it, or soften its edges. The mind does not create every storm, but it can mistake one cloud for the end of the sky. A thought does not need to disappear before freedom begins. That may be one of the most important facts in this whole terrain. Many people imagine inner peace as a blank room, with no voices, no images, no memory, no future. Then the first thought appears, and they conclude they have failed. But the goal is not a perfectly empty mind. The goal is a different relationship to the mind that is actually here. A thought can arise and be known, a prediction can arise and be tested, a judgment can arise and be held lightly. An emotion can arise and be felt in the body without instantly becoming a whole identity. The mind may keep producing weather, but awareness can stop mistaking each weather pattern for the entire climate of the self. This does not make life painless. It makes life less automatically narrowed. A person can feel fear and still choose a small action aligned with care. A person can feel sadness and still answer someone gently. A person can notice anger and still speak in a way that protects a boundary without destroying a relationship. A person can hear an old self-judgment and not hand over the rest of the day to it. This shift is not a final answer, it is a doorway. The laboratory image began with a photon whose pattern changed when path information became physically available. In the human mind, the mystery becomes more intimate. An experience changes when a thought is believed as reality, and changes again when that belief is noticed as belief. No quantum claim is needed. The mechanism is psychological, embodied, and precise enough. The body will still react, the mind will still predict, the past will still lend its shapes to the present, but the first story may not have to be the last world. What becomes possible when a thought appears with its full force and still remains visible as a thought? A thought does not need to vanish in order to lose some of its power. That may be one of the quietest discoveries in the practice of attention. Most people imagine inner freedom as silence. No images, no old conversations, no anxious predictions, no sudden judgments rising from the dark. But the mind that tries to force itself into silence often produces one more sentence. I should be calmer than this. And that sentence can tighten the body almost as much as fear. Conscious observation begins somewhere more modest. A thought appears, and instead of following it instantly, awareness notices its arrival. A word, a picture, a prediction, a familiar accusation. The body may already be responding, but the next layer has not yet been added. Belief is not fully closed around it. The thought is present, but it is not yet the entire room. This sounds simple only when the thought is weak. When the nervous system is charged, a thought does not arrive like a line of text. It arrives with heat, speed, muscle tension, memory, and urgency. A message appears on the phone, and the chest tightens before the sentence has been read twice. Someone uses a certain tone of voice, and the body recognizes danger from another time. Morning heaviness comes, and the mind names the whole day before the feet reach the floor. In moments like these, the space between thought and reaction is not a wide field, it is a narrow crack in stone. Yet even that crack matters. Mindfulness is often described as non-judgmental attention to the present moment, but the word non-judgmental is easily misunderstood. It does not mean losing the ability to distinguish what helps from what harms, what is safe from what is not, what needs action from what should be left alone. It means that the first contact with experience does not have to be immediate condemnation. Instead of, "this is wrong," the mind can notice, there is tightness in the body. Instead of, "I cannot bear this," it can notice, fear is rising. Instead of, "I must defend myself," that it can notice, the impulse to defend has appeared. That change alters the timing of reaction. The automatic chain is fast. Stimulus, interpretation, emotion, bodily mobilization, behavior. A sound, then a meaning, then a feeling, then a posture, then a word that cannot be taken back. Conscious observation does not cut the chain by force. It adds information about the chain while it is forming. The organism begins to notice that something is happening before the old behavior has completely taken shape. This is not a mystical gap outside biology. It is a trainable capacity of the nervous system. A body can learn under the right conditions that not every old signal must produce the same old response. Irritation does not always have to become speech. Fear does not always have to become retreat. Shame does not always have to become attack against the self. The emotion can still be real. The response can still be necessary, but the path between them can become less automatic. In that sense, conscious observation is not passivity. Passivity would be allowing the first interpretation to take command without being seen. Observation is more active than it appears because it detects the assembly of action before action is complete. It is like seeing the first stones roll before the slope gives way. The mountain has not disappeared, but the movement is no longer entirely hidden. Thoughts can move like leaves on a dark river. Some are light and pass quickly. Others are heavy, waterlogged, circling in the same current for years. Some carry old loss, some carry warning, some have been repeated so often that they seem to belong to the river itself. Attention does not need to leap into the water after every leaf. Sometimes it is enough to stand on the bank and recognize the direction of the current. This does not deny the force of thought. Some thoughts are connected to real wounds. Some are attached to genuine danger. Some contain information that should be heard. Calling something a thought does not make it false, trivial, or safe to ignore. The point is more precise. A thought can be serious without being complete. It can contain a piece of truth without being allowed to close the whole world around that piece. When this relationship begins to change, a person does not necessarily feel less. Often the opposite happens. Feeling becomes clearer because it is less buried under the secondary struggle. Tension is tension. Sadness is sadness. A thought is a thought. The layers are no longer fused into one dense object. When the layers separate, experience gains texture, and texture allows response. A simple workday can show this with painful clarity. An email appears on a screen. Before the message is fully understood, the body contracts. The usual path may be immediate defense, an abrupt reply, a long inward argument, a search for hidden criticism, an hour of mental rehearsal. The actual email may contain only a practical question, but the nervous system has already entered a larger story. Conscious observation in that moment might be only one breath. The body is reacting. The mind is predicting conflict. Nothing dramatic has happened. There is no perfect calm. The email still exists. The deadline still exists. But the first story has been named before it has swallowed the whole field. The reply that follows may still be firm. It may still set a boundary. It may still say no. But it is less likely to be written by a past threat disguised as the present. The first practical effect of this posture is not bliss. It is a slowing of fusion. A stimulus does not immediately become a story. A story does not immediately become identity. Identity does not immediately become behaviour. In that slowing, a person discovers something ordinary and radical. Not every inner sentence deserves obedience simply because it speaks in the first person. The question then moves from experience into the brain. If someone repeatedly learns to observe thinking without immediately becoming identified with it, the biological system that supports attention must also be involved. Not as a single switch, because the brain has no simple lever-marked anxiety on one side and peace on the other. It is a network of networks, a living city of electrical and chemical activity, where some routes have been travelled for decades and others are barely visible. One of the networks often discussed in this area is the default mode network. The name sounds technical, but the function is familiar. It refers to a set of brain regions that tend to be active when attention is not absorbed in a specific external task, but turns toward internal narrative, remembering the past, imagining the future, thinking about oneself, evaluating other people, rehearsing conversations, and building a personal story across time. This network is not bad. Without it, planning, memory, social understanding, and the sense of continuity in life would be damaged. The difficulty begins when inner narrative becomes a closed loop. The same conversation is replayed, the same fear is reviewed, the same self-judgment returns wearing different clothing. The mind appears to be solving a problem, but the body remains in threat. The default mode network should not be reduced to a suffering machine. That would be too simple. But self-referential thought can, under certain conditions, become rumination, repeated mental chewing that does not nourish action. Rumination has a particular texture. It feels active from the inside. It says, keep going, you're close to certainty. It promises relief after one more replay, one more analysis, one more imagined conversation. But often it keeps the nervous system in contact with the wound while giving the illusion of control. The mind circles the event not because circling works, but because stopping would mean facing uncertainty without the machinery of explanation. Metacognitive awareness changes the loop by seeing it as a loop. Instead of entering the 10th version of the old scene, awareness notices replaying itself. The mind is trying to extract certainty from something uncertain. That recognition may not resolve the event. It may not answer the question, but it changes the process from total immersion to partial observation. The mind is still moving, but the movement has been seen. Other networks matter too. Attention must detect that it has wandered into a story. It must return to sound, breath, posture, task, or another chosen anchor. Systems involved in cognitive control, salience detection, interoception, and emotional regulation all contribute in different ways. There is no single command center sitting above the rest of the brain, like a ruler in a tower. Regulation is coordination. The body signals significance. Emotion carries urgency. Memory adds history. Attention brings context. Behavior takes shape from their temporary alliance. This is why the body cannot be treated as a background detail. Thoughts are not silent subtitles floating above the organism. Believe thoughts alter physiology. A threat prediction can change breathing, heart rate, muscle tone, facial expression, digestion, and the width of attention. A self-judgment can bend the posture before a clear sentence is heard. A remembered humiliation can heat the face in an empty room. Meaning is not abstract once the body believes it. Returning attention to the body can therefore provide data that a story alone cannot. Instead of staying inside, "Why am I like this?" the person may notice pressure in the chest, tightness in the jaw, heat in the hands, shallow breathing, or a collapse in the belly. These sensations are not random. They are part of how emotion becomes embodied. When they are felt directly, the story loses its monopoly on explanation. This is one reason effect labeling can help. To name an emotional state is not to cast a spell over it. It is to bring a different kind of attention to the process. Anger is here. There is grief. Fear is rising. A label, when used carefully, can create enough distance for the emotion to become an event in awareness, rather than the entire identity of the person. It gives shape without pretending to control the shape. Affect labeling also separates primary emotion from secondary suffering. The first wave may be sadness, fear, anger, or hurt. The second wave may say, "I should not feel this. This proves I am weak. This will never end. Something is wrong with me." Often the second wave traps the first. The original emotion may be painful but alive, able to move through the body and time. The judgment around it can make it rigid. To observe emotion consciously is not to stand far away like a cold witness. It is to feel the emotion directly enough that the extra stories around it do not automatically harden. Sadness can be heavy without becoming a verdict on life. Fear can be sharp without proving the future is doomed. Anger can reveal a boundary without dictating the violence of the next sentence. The emotion is not denied. It is given a more accurate place. This distinction matters because intensity is often mistaken for truth. When fear is powerful, its prediction feels accurate. When shame burns, its accusation feels deserved. When grief fills the body, the future can seem empty, because the nervous system is currently unable to feel its shape. But intensity is not the same as precision. A signal can be strong and still incomplete. A map drawn in emergency may save a life, or it may erase half the terrain. The practice is not to become calm at all costs. That goal would create a new failure every time calm does not come. The deeper aim is not to be completely swallowed. Sometimes the available space is large. Sometimes it is only the width of one breath before speaking. But even that can matter. A person can feel rage and not become rage. A person can feel fear and still gather more information. A person can feel shame and still choose not to attack themselves. In this sense, attention has an ethical consequence. The way a person relates to inner experience affects how they act in the world. A belief thought can turn into a word. A word can change a relationship. A reaction can become an apology, a rupture, a habit, a reputation, a pattern repeated in a child's nervous system. Inner observation is not private in its consequences. What happens in the silent gap can shape what happens outside the body. The brain's capacity to learn from repetition gives this process its slow power. Neuroplasticity does not mean the brain can be rewritten instantly by desire. It does not mean pain disappears if a person thinks correctly. It means that neural structure and function can change to some degree through repeated activity, experience, attention, and behavior. The brain is not a fixed stone. It is living tissue shaped by use. This can be sobering. Many people say they want a different inner life while unknowingly rehearsing the old one with great devotion. Attention returns to threat, replay, resentment, self-attack, comparison, imagined rejection, and catastrophic prediction. The brain does not learn only from what a person wants. It learns from what a person repeatedly does with attention. Repeated attention is a form of training, even when no one intended to train. That statement must be held with care. It is not an accusation. People do not choose their nervous systems from outside history. A body learns in families, in danger, in loneliness, in trauma, in chronic stress, in illness, in environments where certain reactions once made sense. Some loops are strong because they were once protective. The fact that attention can reinforce patterns does not mean a person caused their suffering by weakness. It means that change, when possible, must include the body that learned to survive. A city at night is a useful image. Some roads blaze with traffic because they have carried vehicles for years. Anxiety has its highways, shame has its alleys, defensive anger has its fast bridges. A new practice does not rebuild the city overnight. It begins by lighting smaller paths between familiar routes. At first, they seem too narrow to matter, but repeated passage can make a route more available. Emotional regulation belongs here, but the phrase can be misleading. It can sound like a control panel, as if a skilled person simply lowers sadness, turns down anger, and increases calm. Real regulation is not emotional obedience. It is the ability to stay in contact with feeling without being forced into the most automatic behaviour the feeling suggests. It allows emotion to inform action without becoming the only source of action. Prefrontal systems may help with planning, inhibition, perspective, and flexible response. Limbic structures, including the amygdala, help detect relevance and potential threat. But it is too crude to describe this as reason fighting emotion. Emotion is not a primitive enemy. It carries information about safety, need, connection, boundary, and meaning. Regulation is more like a temporary negotiation in which emotional systems signal urgency. Bodily systems provide energy. Memory offers context. And attention makes room for a response that is not merely reflex. Suppression is different. Suppression says, I must not feel this. Space says, this feeling is here, and I need to know it clearly before I act. Suppression pushes the signal down, often leaving the body strained and the pattern unresolved. Space allows the signal to exist without granting it total command. Suppression fears the emotion. Space respects it without surrendering to it. The difference appears in anger. Anger may arise when a boundary is crossed. It can carry energy, clarity, and protection. If it is suppressed, the body may remain tense, the face polite, the resentment hidden but active. If it is fused with behaviour, the anger may become attack. If it is observed with space, it can become information. Something matters here. Something needs to be named. Something may need to stop. The action that follows can still be firm, but it does not have to be blind. The same is true of fear. Fear may protect from danger, but fear can also confuse memory with prediction. A present situation may resemble an old threat without being identical to it. If fear is suppressed, the body may become more alarmed. If fear is believed without question, the world may shrink around avoidance. If fear is observed, the organism can ask a more accurate question. What is actually happening now, and what is the next safe step? This is where coherence becomes a tempting word. In physics, coherence has a precise meaning. Quantum coherence refers to phase relationships between states that allow interference. Decoherence refers to the loss of observable interference as a system becomes entangled with its environment. These are not metaphors inside the physics. They are mathematical and experimental concepts. When speaking about attention, coherence must be used differently. A coherent mind is not a quantum coherent laboratory system. Meditation does not prove the brain is maintaining a macroscopic quantum state. Calm does not demonstrate that consciousness is rewriting physics. Those claims would stretch language beyond evidence. But as a psychological metaphor, coherence can be useful if handled honestly. Everyone knows the experience of fragmentation. One part of attention is in a future task, another is in a past conversation, another is in the phone, another is tracking bodily discomfort, another is judging the whole process. The mind is full, but not integrated. It resembles an orchestra warming up in separate rooms, sound everywhere, shape nowhere. When attention gathers, the instruments do not necessarily fall silent. Thoughts may still occur, emotions may still move, sensations may still be unpleasant. But the parts begin to share a field. A sound is heard as sound. A breath is felt as movement. A thought is recognized as thought. An emotion is located in the body. Instead of competing to define the entire moment, Each layer is allowed to be what it is. Neuroscience sometimes discusses neural synchrony, the temporal coordination of activity across groups of neurons. This should not be romanticized into a simple measure of enlightenment. The brain is too complex for that. But coordination among neural systems is essential for perception, attention, memory, and action. To see a scene, hear a voice, move a hand, or understand a sentence, distributed signals must be integrated into usable patterns. States of deep engagement often show this in ordinary life. A musician playing carefully is not absent. Attention is precise. The fingers, sound, timing, memory, and listening belong to the same movement. A climber on rock, a surgeon in a difficult procedure, a craftsperson shaping material, a parent listening closely to a child. In these moments, the self-commentary may soften because attention is organized around what is happening. The person has not disappeared. The friction around the person has decreased. Meditative presence has a different texture from flow in action, but it can share one feature: less division between experience and the commentary about experience. A thought may arise, but it does not need to become an argument with itself. An emotion may rise, but it does not need to be instantly judged. The breath may be uneven, but the unevenness can be known without being treated as failure. The system becomes less occupied with resisting its own contents. This is not happiness in the shallow sense. It is not a pleasant mood painted over everything. Coherence of attention means that less energy is spent on inner conflict. The body is not ignored. The emotion is not denied. The thought is not automatically believed. The present is not constantly overwritten by the future. Experience becomes more passable, as a path after heavy rain becomes passable before it becomes dry. The paradox is that this kind of coherence cannot be forced directly. The harder the mind tries to manufacture unity, the more it often creates another split. The part that wants calm and the part that is not calm. The part that observes and the part being criticized for failing to be observed correctly. A hand closes around sand to keep it, and pressure makes the grains escape. This is why many people turn attention practice into another project of self-repair. I must be less anxious. I must stop thinking. I must become present. The intention may be sincere, but the structure is familiar. First reject what is happening, then apply pressure, then measure the result, then judge the self. The mind escapes one prison by building a quieter one. When practice becomes pressure, the nervous system does not receive safety. It receives a new demand. Even calm becomes a test. A thought appears, and the person fails. Anxiety remains, and the person fails. The body is tense, and the person fails. The inner critic has learned a new vocabulary, but not a new relationship. Relaxed alertness is different. It is awake, but not clenched. It knows what is happening, but does not grip each event as a problem to solve immediately. The attention is clear, yet soft enough to allow experience to change in its own time. It is not the absence of effort. It is effort without the extra violence of control. This distinction has a bodily basis. A nervous system under pressure mobilizes. The breath shortens, muscles prepare, attention narrows, and the organism becomes oriented toward threat or task. That response is useful when something must be done quickly. But inner settling does not arise through the same mechanism as sprinting. The body does not usually relax because it is commanded to relax with urgency. It relaxes more readily when it receives evidence that it is not under immediate attack, including attack from its own inner voice. That is why trying to calm down can increase agitation. The person watches the breath and judges whether it is deep enough. They notice thoughts and become irritated that thoughts are present. They feel anxiety and become anxious about anxiety. Every layer of observation becomes another layer of pressure. The problem is not awareness itself. It is the demand smuggled into awareness. A real shift may occur when even the demand is noticed. The mind wants a result. The body is bracing against not being calm. There is frustration that practice is not working. These observations do not condemn the demand. They include it. Once the wish to control is also seen as a mental event, it loses some of its authority. It may remain, but it no longer stands outside the field pretending to supervise everything else. Then the practice becomes simpler. There is no special state to manufacture. There is only this body, this thought, this pressure, this sound, this moment of wanting something different, and the awareness that can notice wanting. Sometimes that is enough for the system to soften by 1 degree. Not because it has been conquered, but because it has stopped being fought in the same old way. This is the meaning of effortless effort. It is not laziness. It is not giving up. It is the exact amount of engagement required without the added tension of ownership. Attention returns, but it does not punish itself for having wandered. The body is felt, but it is not ordered to become peaceful on command. The emotion is recognized, but not treated as an enemy. There is work, but less war. In an evening room, this may look almost like nothing. A person sits near an open window. Traffic moves somewhere beyond the building. The mind returns to a conversation that might have gone differently. The old movement would be to replay each sentence, search for the perfect answer, prove guilt, prove innocence, correct the past that cannot be corrected. Effortless effort may be only this. Hear the passing car, feel the back against the chair, know that the mind is replaying the scene. And not add the command that replaying must stop at once. Small as it seems, the nervous system may need exactly that experience. It needs to discover that not every inner current has to be followed. It needs to experience discomfort without immediate obedience. It needs to learn that a thought can be present without becoming a command. An emotion can be strong without becoming identity. And a memory can return without dragging the whole body back into the past. From here, the work leaves the quiet room. Real life does not wait for ideal conditions. It happens in traffic, at work, in family kitchens, in crowded shops, in late-night messages, in rooms where one sentence touches an old wound with surgical precision. There, calm is not an aesthetic state. There, the crucial thing is a microscopic gap. The gap between stimulus and reaction is not always long. Sometimes it is less than a second. The phone vibrates, and the hand reaches before intention forms. A car slows unexpectedly. An irritation rises before the brake is fully pressed. A colleague sends a short reply, and the mind creates a story about disrespect. A partner grows quiet, and old fear begins writing meaning as if it has the evidence. This speed is part of being alive. Without automatic reactions, ordinary life would be unbearably slow. But the same automaticity that saves energy can narrow a life. In the instant of stimulus, several responses may be possible. The first thought can harden them into one track. This is an attack. They do not care. I am being trapped. I have no time. Here it comes again. Once such a sentence takes command, the body starts behaving according to the world the sentence has created. Traffic reveals the mechanism because it removes subtlety. A vehicle enters the lane more slowly than expected. The physical event is simple: motion, speed, distance, braking. But the mind adds intention. They did that to me. No one pays attention. People are selfish. Hands tighten on the wheel, breath shortens. The reaction is no longer only to a car. It is to an entire story about a world that obstructs, disrespects, and threatens control. A conscious pause does not mean becoming less safe. It means seeing more accurately. The car is slowing. The foot must brake. Anger is rising. The mind is adding intention. The body wants to push forward. In that quick recognition, the response can remain decisive without being fed by the whole old story. The brake is pressed. The lane is watched. The words that might have erupted may not need to form. Work stress has its own version. A new task arrives when the day is already full. A deadline moves closer. A manager asks a question in a tone that sounds like criticism. The body accelerates, and the mind turns workload into identity. There is too much to do becomes I am failing. This is urgent becomes everything is collapsing. The organism starts moving faster and less accurately, switching windows, answering sharply, losing context, confusing motion with effectiveness. The gap does not remove the work. It changes the meaning attached to the work. There is a lot here is different from I am incompetent. The deadline is short is different from I am about to be exposed. A 10-second pause can separate the actual situation from the mental expansion of the situation. The result may be practical: set priorities, ask for clarification, delay one task, send a cleaner answer, or recognize that the body is reacting faster than reality requires. Psychology calls this response flexibility. It is not the ability to always respond perfectly. It is the ability to let more information pass between stimulus and behavior. Automatic reaction uses a narrow sample: the first impression, the old memory, the bodily alarm. Flexible response includes context, long-term intention, likely consequences, present facts, and the possibility that the first interpretation is not the only one. The body is central here too. Impulse regulation requires the organism to tolerate the charge of an emotion without needing immediate discharge. Anger wants words, fear wants escape, shame wants disappearance, desire wants the object now. The gap is the capacity to feel the pull without instantly becoming the pull. It is not numbness, it is charged awareness. Suppression cannot do this well because suppression creates another struggle. Do not be angry may tighten the body while leaving the anger active underground. Do not be afraid may add shame to fear. Do not care may bury the hurt without freeing the person from it. Space is different. Space says, anger is here, and before I speak I need to feel it clearly enough not to let it speak blindly. Space does not deny the signal. It prevents the signal from becoming the whole driver. This difference can change relationships, though not by magic. If one person pauses before reacting, the social field changes. A tone is softer, a question replaces an accusation, a silence becomes less threatening. The other person may still react defensively, the situation may still be difficult, but one automatic escalation has not been fed. In human systems, that can be enough to alter the next second. The gap also protects action from becoming avoidance. Sometimes awareness reveals that a boundary is needed. The pause is not used to tolerate harm endlessly. It is used to respond more accurately. A person may say, I cannot continue this conversation if you speak to me this way, or I need time before I answer, or no. The difference is that the words come from contact with the situation, not only from the explosion of an old pattern. This is why the practice is not simply about feeling better. It is about seeing better before acting. Feeling better may come sometimes, but it cannot be the only measure. A courageous response may still feel uncomfortable. A healthy boundary may still produce fear. An honest conversation may still shake the body. The question is not whether discomfort disappears. The question is whether discomfort is allowed to dictate the entire shape of behavior. In the smallest moments, this becomes almost invisible. The hand pauses before opening the phone. The breath is noticed before replying. The jaw unclenches before the next sentence. The mind says, again, and awareness notices the word before the whole archive of the past enters the room. Nothing spectacular happens, no one else may see it. Yet the nervous system has practiced a different route. This route may fail many times. That matters less than the inner critic claims. Every practice involving attention includes wandering, forgetting, fusing, reacting, and returning. The return is not evidence that practice failed. The return is the practice. Each time the mind is seen after being lost, a little more information enters the system. The old loop is still there, but it is no longer completely without witness. And over time, the witness itself becomes less dramatic. At first, noticing may feel like a special act, almost artificial. Later, it may become more ordinary. Thinking, tightening, planning, defending, remembering, wanting. These small recognitions can appear inside ordinary life without stopping the life they appear in. A person can walk, listen, work, care for others, and still know something about the mind's movement. The deepest effect is not that thoughts end. It is that thoughts lose some of their invisibility. The first story still forms, but a second capacity forms near it. The body still reacts, but awareness can include the reaction. Emotion still rises, but the person is less completely defined by the rise. The world still presses in, but the meaning of the world is not handed entirely to the fastest prediction. This creates a new kind of responsibility, not the harsh responsibility of blaming oneself for every inner event, but the living responsibility of noticing how inner events become outer actions. A thought believed too quickly can become distance. A fear obeyed too quickly can become silence where honesty was needed. An anger fused too quickly can become damage. A pause, even a small one, can become a different word, a different boundary, a different day. The first half of the journey was about recognizing thought as thought. The deeper movement is learning that this recognition is not only private, it changes timing, physiology, attention, emotion, and behavior. It gives the organism more information before it moves. It turns the mind from a hidden ruler into a process that can be observed while it is working. And once that process is seen inside one person, the next question naturally moves outward. Because human beings rarely suffer only inside isolated minds. They suffer in the spaces between minds, in tone, silence, expectation, memory, misunderstanding, and the stories carried into the face of another person. What happens when the same microscopic pause enters the space between two people? The space between two people can close faster than either of them can name it. A sentence is spoken, a face changes, a breath is held half a second too long, and the room begins to organize around a meaning. Nothing dramatic has to happen. No one has to shout. Sometimes the whole turn is carried by a small delay before answering, a sharper consonant in the voice, a glance that leaves too quickly. A nervous system does not receive another person as a neutral object. It reads tone, posture, distance, rhythm, eye movement, facial tension, the speed of speech, the length of a pause. It compares the present signal with memory. It estimates whether the person in front of it is safe, hostile, bored, ashamed, interested, tired, or preparing to withdraw. Much of this happens before deliberate thought has time to form a sentence. That speed is useful. Human beings are social animals. To live with others, the brain has to detect subtle changes in mood and intention. A child learns from the face of a caregiver before it understands language. An adult can enter a room and sense tension before anyone explains the argument that happened 10 minutes earlier. The social world is made of signals too small to be treated as formal evidence, yet strong enough to alter the body. But this speed also creates a problem. If the brain is always using past experience to read the present, then the person in front of us is never only the person in front of us. They are also the memory of the last conflict, the tone of an older wound, the pattern we expect from them, and sometimes the pattern we learned from someone else entirely. The present arrives mixed with an archive. The archive can protect. If someone has repeatedly harmed us, memory is not an obstacle to awareness. It is information. Boundaries depend on remembering patterns. A fresh perception of the moment does not require becoming naive. It does not mean erasing the past in order to be kind. It means allowing the present to be tested by the past without being completely swallowed by it. The difference is narrow but important. A healthy boundary says, "This has happened before, and I need to protect myself." A fused story says, "I already know everything this person is and everything they will do." The first can remain connected to reality. The second stops looking. It turns a living interaction into a replay. Confirmation bias enters quietly here. Once the mind has a story about someone, it more easily notices what confirms the story and misses small deviations that complicate it. If we believe someone does not respect us, a late reply becomes evidence. A tired expression becomes evidence. A brief silence becomes evidence. A gesture of care may be discounted because it does not fit the pattern. The other person becomes less a person than a collection of selected proof. This is how two people can meet and still not quite encounter each other. One speaks to the present moment. The other hears a history. One asks a question. The other hears accusation. One is tired. The other hears rejection. One is quiet because they do not know what to say. The other hears abandonment. The conversation may seem to involve two bodies in one room, but psychologically it involves many older rooms at once. The word again can carry this entire mechanism. "You're doing it again." Sometimes the word is accurate because a pattern truly is repeating. But often it drags the past into the present as a completed verdict, before the present has been examined. The person receiving it may immediately defend not only the current action, but every old version of themselves that has ever been accused. The room fills with ghosts of previous arguments. A different sentence can open another route. "Can you tell me what you meant?" Spoken without hidden attack is not weak. It is an attempt to gather data before the story hardens. The answer may confirm the concern. It may reveal carelessness. It may reveal misunderstanding. It may reveal that the other person was reacting to something entirely different. The question does not guarantee repair, but it prevents the first interpretation from becoming the only possible world before evidence has entered. Active listening works through this kind of precision. It is not simply being quiet while waiting to speak. It is an effort to hear the actual meaning before memory replaces it. It checks interpretation against the other person's words. It notices when the mind has filled in a tone, motive, or accusation that was not clearly said. It asks enough to distinguish what happened from what was expected to happen. This can sound ordinary, almost too simple, until the body's charged. When the nervous system expects attack, a clarifying question may feel dangerous. It delays defense. It leaves the person exposed to uncertainty. It asks the body to hold energy without discharging it into blame or withdrawal. That holding is not passive. It is a difficult form of regulation happening inside a relationship. The social field responds to such regulation. One person's anxiety can accelerate another person. Speech speeds up. Interruptions multiply. Faces tighten. Each body reads the other's tension as further evidence that something is wrong. A small misunderstanding can become a self-amplifying loop, not because either person planned harm, but because each nervous system is treating the other's alarm as information. Calm can also move through the space, though not by magic. A slower tone, a less defensive face, a pause before answering, a body that does not lean into attack, a sentence that names the issue without contempt. These signals can reduce the need for immediate protection. They do not control the other person. They do not guarantee safety, but they change the information available in the room. Emotional contagion is not mystical transfer. It belongs to the social nature of the nervous system. Humans regulate and dysregulate each other through voice, expression, proximity, timing, and expectation. A baby settles with a caregiver's rhythm before it has concepts. Adults still do versions of this, though with more language and more defenses. We borrow atmosphere from one another. We also lend it. This is why presence is not only an inequality, it has relational consequences. A person who can notice their anger without immediately turning it into attack gives the other person less to defend against. A person who can notice fear without instantly withdrawing leaves more contact available. A person who can notice shame without turning it into self-erasure may stay present long enough to say what they need. The internal pause becomes part of the external environment. The mechanism is ordinary and powerful. The brain reads another person's body as part of the situation. If that body is tense, fast, contemptuous, or unpredictable, the situation feels different than if it is steady, honest, and clear. A relationship is not made only of statements. It is made of timing. It is made of muscles around the eyes, air held in the lungs, the distance between a question and an answer, the willingness to repair after a misstep. Mirror neurons are sometimes brought into this discussion, but they should be treated carefully. They were first described in relation to neural activity during both action and observation of action, and their role in human empathy is not a complete explanation of social life. They are not a secret key to every relationship. The safer point is broader. Perceiving another person is active, bodily, and connected to our own systems for action and feeling. We do not watch each other like cameras. We simulate, predict, prepare, and respond. That is why a face can hurt before a sentence is spoken. The face is not only seen, it is read through the body. A certain expression may call up old posture. A certain tone may tighten the throat. A certain pause may make the stomach fall. These reactions are not always accurate, but they are real biological events. They shape what is heard next. The practical question is not how to eliminate these reactions. That would be unrealistic. The question is whether they can be included in awareness before they become the whole truth. My body is reading danger. I am hearing criticism. I am assuming withdrawal. These small recognitions do not settle the relationship. They give the present a chance to be tested. A conversation at a kitchen counter can show the whole pattern. One person says, "You didn't tell me about this." The other hears accusation because many past conversations have begun with that edge. The body prepares. The answer comes back quickly. "I didn't think I had to report everything." Now the first person hears dismissal. Their voice rises. The original issue may have been small, but the relationship has entered an older track. A different track may begin with the same first sentence. "You didn't tell me about this." The body still reacts. The old defense still appears. But the second person notices it before speaking. The answer changes by only a few degrees. "I hear that you feel left out. I did not mean to hide it. Can we look at what happened?" The sentence is not perfect. It may not work, but it sends a different signal into the room. It offers information where the old track offered armor. Sometimes the other person cannot receive it. Their nervous system may already be too activated. Their own story may be too strong. Their pain may be legitimate and still not ready for careful speech. Presence does not mean one person can regulate an entire relationship alone. The fantasy that enough calm can repair any interaction places an unfair burden on the person trying to stay conscious. Some situations require distance, protection, outside help, or an ending. This is where boundaries and compassion must not be separated. Compassion without boundaries can become self-abandonment. Boundaries without compassion can become punishment. A precise response may say, "I understand that you are hurting, and I will not accept being insulted. I care about this relationship, and I need time before continuing. I want to hear you, and I cannot hear you while you are shouting." Such sentences try to preserve reality on both sides. Your experience matters. And so does mine. The mind often treats these as opposites. Either I protect myself, or I am kind. Either I stay open, or I stay safe. But a regulated nervous system can sometimes hold more than one truth at once. The other person may be in pain, and their behavior may still be harmful. I may be hurt, and I may still choose not to retaliate. A relationship may matter, and a boundary may still be necessary. This is not emotional softness. It is cognitive and physiological complexity under pressure. That complexity requires the same capacity developed inwardly, seeing the story before becoming it. In conflict, the mind's story often has a rigid cast. There is a victim, a villain, a judge, a sentence, a long list of exhibits. The story may contain real evidence. It may point to real harm. But if it becomes total, it removes the possibility of learning anything new. The other person is no longer allowed to surprise us except by fitting the accusation better. To meet someone freshly does not mean pretending we do not know them. It means allowing the current moment to have some rights of its own. The familiar face is like a landscape after rain, recognizable, shaped by the same slopes and paths, yet altered by recent weather. The voice has its old rhythm, but there may be new fatigue in it. The eyes may hold something that was not there yesterday. The pattern may repeat, or it may not. Attention has to stay awake enough to find out. This fresh attention can be especially difficult with people closest to us. Strangers are often allowed to be complex because we do not know enough to simplify them. Familiar people are easier to reduce. The partner becomes the one who never listens. The parent becomes the one who always criticizes. The child becomes the dramatic one, the careless one, the strong one. These labels may begin as attempts to understand patterns, but over time they can become cages. A label can guide attention so strongly that behavior starts to form around it. If a child is repeatedly treated as careless, every mistake becomes proof, and every careful act becomes exception. If a partner is treated as incapable of listening, even attempts to listen may be interpreted as performance. If a parent is treated only as a critic, moments of fear or clumsy affection may never be recognized. The story does not merely describe the relationship, it begins to participate in creating it. This is one of the sharpest consequences in the entire subject. A believed thought changes not only the person who believes it, in relationships it changes the signals sent to another nervous system, and those signals can help evoke the very behaviour the thought expected. Suspicion changes tone, tone evokes defence, defence confirms suspicion. The story returns carrying evidence that it helped produce. The loop can operate in both directions. A person who expects rejection may withdraw before being rejected. The withdrawal may make others less likely to approach, which then confirms the expectation. A person who expects criticism may answer defensively before criticism is spoken, provoking frustration in the other person. A person who expects abandonment may demand reassurance with such urgency that the other person feels overwhelmed and pulls away. The original pain is real, but the protective strategy becomes part of the pattern that repeats it. Seeing this loop is painful because it removes the comfort of one-sided explanation. It does not mean all harm is mutual. It does not mean victims are responsible for mistreatment. It means that in many ordinary conflicts, the nervous systems of both people co-create a field of reaction. Each person is responding to what the other is doing and also to what they expect the other will do. The present becomes a negotiation between perception and memory. The pause can interrupt that negotiation. Not always, not completely, but enough to insert a different signal. Instead of accusation, a question. Instead of withdrawal, a statement of need. Instead of contempt, a boundary. Instead of a rehearsed defense, a moment of listening. These are small changes in language, but they are not only language. They change facial muscles, breath, timing, and the amount of threat in the room. A nervous system under threat tends to narrow. It seeks certainty. It wants fast categories. Safe or unsafe, friend or enemy, right or wrong, stay or leave. Sometimes that narrowing is appropriate. In genuine danger, complexity can slow survival. But many intimate conflicts are not immediate physical danger. They are meaning danger, fear of being dismissed, misunderstood, controlled, abandoned, exposed, or made small. The body may react as if survival is at stake, because belonging is deeply tied to survival history. That is why social pain can feel so physical. Exclusion, rejection, contempt, and shame do not remain abstract. They register in the body. The face heats, the chest closes, the stomach drops, the throat tightens. The mind may then look for a story intense enough to match the intensity of the sensation. If the body feels endangered, the story becomes large. They never cared. I am always alone. This relationship is impossible. Nothing will change. Intensity again masquerades as proof, but in relationships, strong feeling can arise from present harm, old harm, or the collision between them. The body may be responding to the current sentence, and also to every previous sentence that trained it to expect pain. Without awareness, all of that history is assigned to the person standing here now. They may deserve some of it. They may not deserve all of it. The distinction matters because justice without precision becomes another injury. Active listening is one way to restore precision. It asks the mind to separate the actual words from the interpretation placed on top of them. It may sound like, "When you said that, I heard it as criticism. Is that what you meant?" Or, "I noticed I wanted to defend myself. I want to understand first." Or, "I need to pause because I am starting to react to more than what you just said." These sentences do not guarantee safety. They create a testable space. The testable space is the heart of communication. A thought inside the mind can become absolute if it is never checked. Spoken carefully, it becomes something that can meet reality. The other person can clarify, confirm, correct, refuse, or reveal. The relationship becomes less dependent on silent interpretation. It becomes more exposed to evidence. There is vulnerability in this. To ask, "Did you mean to hurt me?" is different from announcing, "You hurt me on purpose." The first leaves the room for an answer. The second has already held the trial. Sometimes the answer reveals that harm was intended. Then a boundary may become clearer. Sometimes the answer reveals misunderstanding. Then repair becomes possible. Either way, the conversation is more accurate because the story was opened before it hardened. Repair is a major part of relational safety. No relationship avoids all rupture. People misread, forget, snap, withdraw, over-explain, under-listen, and speak from fatigue. What matters is not perfect smoothness, but whether rupture can be noticed and repaired. Repair says, something went wrong in the field between us, and we can turn toward it without pretending it did not happen, or making it the whole identity of the relationship. A repair attempt may be small. I said that too sharply. I got defensive. Let me try again. I think I heard you through an old fear. I need to understand what landed badly. These sentences are modest, but their physical effect can be large. They tell the other nervous system that the threat may not need to escalate. They show that the speaker can observe themselves. Self-observation becomes relational information. This is one of the ways trust is built. Trust is not only the belief that someone will never make a mistake. That would be fragile trust, easily shattered by ordinary human failure. Deeper trust includes the expectation that when something goes wrong, it can be acknowledged. The other person can return. They can notice impact. They can adjust. A relationship with repair has more resilience because it does not depend on the impossible condition of never being disturbed. Still, repair cannot be demanded from one side alone. If one person repeatedly harms and never reflects, the other person's awareness cannot make the relationship safe by itself. If apologies are used to reset a pattern without change, repair becomes performance. If listening is requested only from the wounded person while the harmful behavior continues, the language of mindfulness can become a tool of avoidance. Precision is needed here too. Presence is not permission to remain in damage. The body knows patterns before the mind has fully admitted them. A certain conversation begins and the shoulders brace. A certain apology is heard and the stomach does not believe it. A certain promise arrives and the chest stays guarded. These signals should not be dismissed as irrational. They may contain learned information, but they also need to be examined because the body can remember both truth and fear. The work is not to obey every signal or silence every signal. The work is to listen accurately. Accurate listening includes the self. Many people try to be present with others while abandoning their own inner data. They notice the other person's pain, but not their own tightening. They hear the other person's story, but not the small internal no. They confuse empathy with disappearance. The result may look kind from the outside, but inside it creates resentment, exhaustion, and eventually distance. Empathy requires contact with both sides of the relationship. To feel with another person while staying aware of one's own body is different from being swallowed by the other person's emotion. If their anger floods the room, and we lose all internal ground, we may appease, attack, or collapse. If we remain connected enough to ourselves, we can say, I hear that this matters. I also need the conversation to slow down. The boundary does not cancel empathy. It makes empathy sustainable. This is especially important because emotional states can spread. A panicked person can pull others into speed. A contemptuous person can invite contempt. A shut-down person can make the room feel cold. A regulated person may not fix the whole field, but they can reduce the pressure to join the strongest emotion present. They become, for a moment, an alternative rhythm. The rhythm matters. In a tense conversation, the nervous system tracks timing with astonishing sensitivity. An answer that comes too fast may feel like dismissal. A pause that is too long may feel like withdrawal. A soft voice may soothe or may feel patronizing depending on context. A direct gaze may feel connective or intrusive. There is no universal signal that always means safety. Meaning is made in context, history, culture, and the particular bodies involved. This is why relational awareness cannot be reduced to techniques. A technique can help, but if it is used without presence, it becomes another mask. Someone can repeat, I hear you, while not hearing. They can ask a question while hiding a verdict. They can speak softly while controlling. The nervous system often detects the mismatch. The words say calm, but the jaw says pressure. The sentence says openness, but the timing says hurry. Authenticity is not raw expression without restraint. It is alignment between inner state, language, and action. If anger is present, authenticity may not mean shouting. It may mean saying, "I am angry and I need to speak carefully." If fear is present, it may mean, "I want to leave this conversation, but I am trying to stay long enough to understand." If confusion is present, it may mean, "I do not know what I am feeling yet." Such speech carries less performance because it includes the actual state of the speaker. This kind of speech can feel slower than ordinary reaction, but slowness here is not weakness. It is increased resolution. Like a camera allowing more light before forming the image, the mind allows more data before forming a response. Body, emotion, context, values, the other person's words, the possible consequence of the next sentence. The result may be quieter, but it is often more accurate. There is a cost. The old reaction gives immediate relief. Blame gives shape. Defense gives armor. Withdrawal gives distance. Attack gives a burst of power. The pause removes that relief for a moment. It asks the body to remain in uncertainty. It asks the mind not to complete the story too quickly. It asks a person to feel the heat before deciding what the heat means. This is why awareness in relationships can feel harder than awareness alone. Alone, a thought can be noticed without another person interrupting the process. In relationship, the other person continues moving. They speak again. Their face changes. Their nervous system reacts to ours while ours reacts to theirs. The situation is dynamic. The pause is not a quiet room. It is a small clearing inside a moving storm. The storm image is useful only if it leads back to mechanism. In conflict, each person's cues become inputs for the other's predictive system. Prediction shapes perception. Perception shapes physiology. Physiology shapes expression. Expression becomes a cue for the other person. The loop can escalate, stabilize, or soften depending on what enters it. A single regulated moment can sometimes change the loop because it changes the next input. This does not mean one person is responsible for controlling the room. It means that every person contributes signals. A tightened face is a signal. A softened voice is a signal. Leaving without explanation is a signal. Saying, "I need 5 minutes so I do not say this badly," is also a signal. Relationships are built from these signals repeated over time until they become expectations. Expectations are powerful because they preload the future. If two people expect injury, each ambiguous movement is interpreted through defense. If two people expect repair, a mistake may still hurt, but it does not automatically mean the end of safety. If one person expects abandonment and the other expects accusation, even neutral moments can become charged. The relationship develops a weather system of anticipation. Changing that weather requires more than one conversation. The nervous system trusts patterns, not speeches. A sincere insight may matter, but repeated behavior teaches more deeply. The body learns that a pause can be safe only if pauses are repeatedly followed by return, not disappearance. It learns that honesty is safe only if honesty is not repeatedly punished. It learns that boundaries are real only if they are held when pressure rises. This is where values enter the field. Without values, awareness can become endless self-monitoring. A person may notice every thought and still not know how to act. Values give direction when emotion is loud. They answer questions the nervous system alone cannot settle. What kind of person do I want to be in this conflict? What kind of relationship is possible here? What must be protected? What must be repaired? What cannot be crossed? Values are not abstract slogans when they meet the body. Honesty may require feeling fear and speaking anyway. Kindness may require slowing down when anger wants speed. Self-respect may require ending a conversation even though guilt rises. Courage may require asking a question whose answer may hurt. Patience may require tolerating the discomfort of not forcing immediate resolution. Each value becomes real only when it organizes behavior under pressure. A value-guided response does not always feel peaceful. This is important. Many people confuse right action with comfortable feeling. But a boundary can feel frightening and still be necessary. An apology can feel humiliating and still be honest. Listening can feel difficult and still be chosen. Leaving can feel sad and still be wise. The body's discomfort is information, not a final verdict. In this way, the pause between stimulus and response begins to widen into a life practice. At first, it appears only after the reaction has already happened. Later, it appears during the reaction. Sometimes it appears just before the reaction. The mind still produces old thoughts. The body still carries old readiness. But awareness begins to arrive earlier in the sequence. A person becomes more able to intervene before the story has become behavior. This timing is the hidden variable of many relationships. People often focus on what was said, but when it was noticed may matter just as much. If defensiveness is noticed after an hour of argument, repair is possible but costly. If it is noticed after the second sentence, the argument may never fully form. If shame is noticed before withdrawal, contact may remain. If anger is noticed before contempt, the boundary may be spoken without injury. The change is not dramatic from the outside. It may look like one breath, a hand unclenching, a person saying, "Give me a second," a reply typed, paused, deleted, and rewritten, a question asked instead of an accusation, a silence that is not punishment, but regulation. These moments are small enough to be missed, but they are where patterns are often interrupted. There is an almost scientific beauty in their smallness. A large pattern does not always change through a large event. Sometimes it changes because one part of the loop fails to behave as predicted. The expected attack does not come. The expected withdrawal is replaced by a clear request for time. The expected accusation becomes curiosity. The system receives a different input, and the next state becomes less determined by the old path. This is not certainty. The loop may still return. The other person may still react. The old pattern may be stronger than one different input. But in a human nervous system, repetition matters. One different moment can become two. Two can become a memory. A memory can become evidence that another route exists. The mind does not have to believe in transformation as an idea if the body has begun to experience it as a pattern. The same principle applies inwardly after conflict. A person may leave a conversation and immediately begin the second argument inside, replaying, defending, accusing, shaming, drafting messages that will never be sent. The relationship continues in the mind after the other person is gone. Sometimes this inner continuation is useful because it helps make sense of what happened. Often it becomes rumination wearing the mask of justice. The pause can enter there too. The person walking down the street after the conversation may feel heat still in the face, words still rising. A bus passes. A shop window reflects a tense posture. The mind begins. They always do this. Awareness may not stop the sentence, but it can notice its force. It can ask whether anything practical is needed now. A boundary, a repair, rest, a written note, a later conversation, or simply time for the body to metabolize the charge. Metabolize is a useful word because emotion is not only an idea. After a conflict, stress physiology may continue. The body may need movement, water, sleep, warmth, distance, or contact with someone safe. Awareness that stays only in analysis may miss this. The mind wants an explanation. The body may need discharge and settling. A whole response includes both. If the body remains activated, the mind will often keep producing reasons for activation. It searches for a story that matches the state. This is why trying to think one's way out of every conflict can fail. Sometimes the most accurate next step is not another interpretation, but a change in state. Step outside, loosen the jaw, feel the feet, write without sending, wait until the nervous system can include more than threat. This is not avoidance if it is used to return more accurately. Avoidance says, "I will disappear so I never have to face this." Regulation says, "I am too activated to speak clearly, and I will come back when I can." The difference is not always obvious to the other person, so communication matters. A pause without explanation may feel like abandonment. A pause with a clear promise may feel like care. Again, the same behavior can carry different meanings depending on how it is held. The relationship between inner and outer worlds grows more complex here. A thought inside one person becomes tone. tone becomes input for another person. Their interpretation becomes posture. Their posture becomes evidence for the first person. The loop crosses bodies. No one's mind is isolated in practice. Even silence communicates when another nervous system's waiting for meaning. This gives responsibility a relational shape. We cannot control how others interpret us. We cannot prevent every misunderstanding. We cannot make someone ready to listen. But we can take responsibility for the signals we knowingly send, for the stories we treat as facts, for the repairs we attempt, for the boundaries we hold, and for the moments when we notice we are speaking from an old wound rather than the current person in front of us. There is humility in this because perception is never perfect. We will misread, we will fuse, we will react. We will bring the archive into the room and only realize it later. The aim is not flawless presence. A relationship that demands perfect awareness becomes another performance. The aim is recoverability, the capacity to notice, return, repair, revise, and learn. Recoverability is more durable than purity. A person who can return after losing themselves is safer than a person who insists they never lose themselves. A relationship that can name its distortions may become more honest than one that pretends no distortions exist. The moment of recognition after a mistake is not outside the practice. It may be the practice in its most human form. The old scientific metaphor returns only as a boundary marker. Quantum measurement taught us not to use observation carelessly. Psychological observation taught us that a thought, once noticed, can lose its invisible authority. Relational observation now shows that the same shift can alter the field between people. Not because attention sends hidden forces through space, but because attention changes timing, tone, interpretation, and behavior, the actual signals from which relationships are built. A thought believed in isolation becomes an inner world. A thought believed in relationship becomes part of a shared field. It can become accusation, silence, defense, repair, curiosity, or boundary. The mind's interpretation does not stay behind the forehead. It enters the body, the voice, the room, the nervous system of another person. Meaning travels by ordinary channels, but the effects can be large. This is why the smallest conscious pause can feel disproportionate to its size. 1 second may prevent a sentence that would take days to repair. 1 breath may allow a question that reveals misunderstanding. 1 moment of noticing shame may keep a person from vanishing behind politeness. 1 recognition of anger may turn attack into boundary. The physical event is small. The downstream consequences can be wide. There is no guarantee. Human beings are too complex for guarantees. The other person may remain defended. The situation may still be unjust. The boundary may still need to be firm. The conversation may still fail. But without the pause, the old pattern often has no competition. With the pause, even briefly, another pattern is allowed to enter the room. And when that begins to happen repeatedly, the question deepens beyond one conversation. Attention no longer appears only as a momentary technique. It becomes a force of learning. A life is shaped by what is repeatedly believed, repeatedly rehearsed, repeatedly defended, repeatedly noticed, repeatedly repaired. The mind becomes familiar with the roads it travels most. Relationships become familiar with the signals they exchange most. Over time, the private habit becomes a visible path. If a single pause can alter one sentence, what begins to change when awareness becomes a repeated condition of how a person lives? A life is not shaped only by what happens once. It is shaped by what is repeated until the nervous system stops noticing the repetition. A thought believed once may pass through like weather. A thought believed every morning becomes climate. A reaction repeated in one conflict may be repaired. A reaction repeated for years becomes a path the body finds without asking. This is where awareness stops being a momentary technique and becomes a biological condition. The brain learns through recurrence, not only through dramatic events, not only through decisions that can be remembered clearly, but through thousands of small returns, the same fear rehearsed, the same judgment believed, the same defensive sentence spoken, the same pause practiced before the old sentence leaves the mouth. A pattern becomes familiar because the organism has travelled it many times. The unsettling part is that the brain does not learn only from what a person consciously values, it learns from what attention actually does. If attention repeatedly goes to threat, the threat network becomes easier to enter. If attention repeatedly goes to self-attack, the body learns the posture of being accused from within. If attention repeatedly returns to breath, body, context, and choice, another route becomes more available. Desire alone does not train the system. Repeated contact does. This does not make suffering a personal failure. The roots inside a nervous system are not drawn in a vacuum. They are shaped by childhood, culture, danger, love, neglect, illness, loss, social pressure, and the basic temperament of the body. Some paths are deep because they were once necessary. A person may have learned to scan for threat because threat was real. They may have learned to apologize before speaking because safety depended on pleasing someone else. They may have learned to disappear emotionally because visibility was punished. So the aim is not to blame the old path, the aim is to see it clearly enough that it is no longer mistaken for the only path. A well-worn inner route has a certain feel, the body knows it before the mind names it. The throat tightens in the same place, the face prepares the same mask, the thought arrives with the same vocabulary, always, never, again, impossible, my fault, their fault, nothing changes. The words may differ, but the movement underneath is recognizable. It is the nervous system entering a familiar corridor. At first, awareness arrives late. The argument is already over. The message has already been sent. The body is already drained. Only afterward does a person realize that was the old pattern. This late recognition can feel like failure, but it is actually the first visible edge of change. A pattern that was once invisible has become visible after the fact. The organism has gained a witness, even if the witness arrived after the behavior. Later, awareness may arrive in the middle. The voice is already sharp, but something hears the sharpness. The shoulders are already raised, but something senses the posture. The mind is already building a case, but something notices the speed of the courtroom. This middle recognition is awkward. It does not instantly undo what has begun, but it can bend the next sentence. It can interrupt the escalation. It can allow repair before the old path completes its full shape. Sometimes, after enough repetition, awareness arrives before the reaction. A person feels the first bodily spark and knows the route that is about to open. Not as an abstract idea, but as a physical familiarity. The stomach drops, and instead of immediately becoming accusation, it becomes information. The hand reaches for the phone, and instead of opening the message with panic, there is a pause. The word again rises, and before the archive floods in, it is heard as a word. This is one way neuroplasticity becomes intimate. It is not a sudden rewriting of the self. It is not a dramatic erasure of the past. It is the slow discovery that a nervous system can learn one less automatic second at a time. The old road does not vanish because a new path appears, but the body begins to know that there is a turn-off. The old road may still be strong. Under stress, fatigue, hunger, grief, or danger, the nervous system often returns to what is most practiced. This is why change can feel uneven. A person may respond with clarity on one day and fall into the old pattern the next. The mind may interpret this as proof that nothing has changed. But learning is rarely linear in living systems. Under pressure, the oldest routes often regain force. The evidence of change is not that the old route never appears. It is that return becomes possible. Return is the hidden discipline, not the perfect state, not the uninterrupted calm. The return. The mind wanders and attention returns. The body tightens and sensation is included. The story takes over, and later it is seen as story. A person reacts, then repairs. The nervous system learns not only from staying present, but from coming back after being lost. This matters because the inner critic often mistakes return for defeat. It says, if you were truly aware, you would not have left. But awareness is not a place permanently occupied by a flawless self. It is a capacity that can reappear inside human conditions. To return is not to prove that practice failed. To return is to give the organism another experience of not being trapped forever inside the first movement. Over time, repeated return can change identity. Not identity as a slogan, not the story of becoming a new person overnight, but identity as the felt sense of what is possible. A person who once believed every anxious prediction may begin to know anxiety as a state that can be carried. A person who once became every self-judgment may begin to hear judgment as a learned voice. A person who once disappeared in conflict may begin to feel the body remain present while a boundary is spoken. This is subtle because the deepest changes often do not announce themselves. They appear in the absence of an old consequence, the argument that did not escalate, the message that was not sent at midnight, the apology given sooner, the boundary held without cruelty. The morning thought noticed before it coloured the whole day. A life may begin to change not through a single revelation, but through many moments that leave less damage behind. The world outside may not applaud these moments. No one may see the sentence that was not spoken. No one may know how much force it took not to follow an old fear. No one may notice the small shift from self-attack to self-contact. But the nervous system notices. Repetition makes a path, even quiet repetition. The same principle applies to attention at the scale of a whole day. A person wakes and the mind begins constructing a world. The calendar becomes a threat or a sequence of tasks. A face becomes judgment or fatigue. A delay becomes rejection or circumstance. A sensation becomes danger or information. None of these meanings is guaranteed by the event alone. The brain is always participating in what the day becomes. This does not mean the world is imaginary. The bills are real, the illness is real, the weather is real, the relationship is real. Other people have their own minds, their own histories, their own choices. But the lived world is not the external world alone. It is the external world as interpreted, predicted, remembered, feared, desired, and embodied by a nervous system. The mind does not invent everything, but it adds the meaning through which everything is encountered. That added meaning can tighten or widen the day. A red traffic light can be only a signal, or it can become proof that the world is obstructing us. A delayed reply can be only uncertainty, or it can become a whole drama of abandonment. A tired body can be only tired, or it can become evidence of personal failure. The raw event is often small. The believed interpretation expands it. Awareness does not remove interpretation. It makes interpretation visible. The mind still names, predicts, compares, protects. It must. A human being cannot live as a blank receptor of sensation. But when interpretation is seen as interpretation, it can be tested. It can be held with proportion. It can be corrected by evidence. It can be softened by compassion. It can be refused when it harms more than it helps. This is where values become essential. Awareness without direction can become endless watching. A person may notice thoughts, sensations, and emotions with great precision and still not know how to live. Values give awareness a direction that is not dictated by the first impulse. They answer, not in theory, but in action. What matters enough to guide this moment? If kindness matters, then the pause before speaking has a purpose. If honesty matters, then fear does not automatically decide silence. If dignity matters, then shame does not get to write every self-description. If protection matters, then compassion does not require remaining where harm continues. If repair matters, then pride is not the final authority. Values convert awareness into movement. A value is not a mood. It may not feel good when it's followed. Speaking honestly may make the body tremble. Holding a boundary may bring guilt. Listening carefully may require staying with discomfort. Apologizing may feel like exposure. Resting may feel irresponsible to a nervous system trained to earn safety through exhaustion. Values often matter most when they do not match the easiest feeling. This is why the gap between stimulus and response is not empty. It is filled with possible organizing principles. The first impulse says one thing. The old wound says another. The body says danger. Memory says remember. Fear says avoid. Anger says push. Shame says disappear. A value says, given all of this, what kind of action still belongs to the life I am trying to live? The answer may be small. It may be washing one dish instead of collapsing under the whole room. It may be saying, I need time. It may be stepping outside before replying. It may be admitting, I was defending myself instead of listening. It may be closing a door and not returning to a conversation that repeatedly causes harm. Values do not always sound elevated. Sometimes they sound like one honest sentence at the correct time. Because action matters, awareness cannot remain only inward. It must eventually meet behaviour. A person can notice resentment for years and still continue speaking indirectly. They can observe fear and still build a life around avoidance. They can name sadness and still refuse care. Insight that never enters behaviour becomes another kind of thought. Useful awareness changes the next movement, even if only by a few degrees. A few degrees matter. A ship crossing an ocean can end in a different place because of a small change in angle repeated over distance. A life is not an ocean crossing in a simple way, but the comparison holds one mechanism clearly. Small deviations compound when they persist. One less automatic reaction, repeated across days, can change the emotional climate of a home. One repeated act of returning to the body can change the relationship to fear. One repeated refusal to treat every thought as fact can change the architecture of suffering. Still, there is a danger in turning this into self-optimization. The mind can convert anything into a project of improvement, even awareness. It may begin asking, am I present enough? Am I changing fast enough? Am I regulating correctly? Am I becoming the right kind of person? Then the old judge has simply learned softer language. It no longer says, you are failing at life. It says, you are failing at consciousness. The antidote is not laziness. It is warmth. A nervous system changes more deeply when it is not being attacked for being a nervous system. Thoughts will return. Defenses will return. Old grief will return. The body will have days when the smallest stimulus feels too large. To meet these returns with contempt is to repeat the same mechanism under a new name. To meet them with indulgence may avoid change. To meet them with firm gentleness gives the system a chance to learn. Firm gentleness is an exacting state. It says this pattern makes sense and it still may not be useful now. It says, this fear protected me once, and I do not want it to decide every future. It says, this anger contains information, and I will not let it burn the whole relationship. It says, this shame is old and I will not treat it as law. There is no denial in such sentences. There is also no surrender. Time itself changes texture under this practice. In fusion, the mind lives pulled toward past and future. A memory is not just remembered, it is re-entered. A prediction is not just imagined, it becomes a place the body inhabits early. The present becomes thin, reduced to a platform from which the mind launches backward and forward. The body remains here, but attention is elsewhere, carrying the physiology of events that are not happening now. This is not always wrong. Memory teaches, prediction protects. Planning makes complex life possible. The problem appears when remembered pain and imagined threat dominate the living present so completely that the organism cannot detect what is different now. A safe room can feel unsafe because the mind is living in an older room. A manageable task can feel impossible because the mind is already inside a future collapse. A conversation can feel doomed because the past has reached forward before the first sentence is finished. Awareness reintroduces time by locating experience. This is a memory. This is a prediction. This is a sensation happening now. This is an old meaning appearing in a new place. Such distinctions may sound ordinary, but they restore temporal accuracy. The past is honoured as memory, not mistaken for immediate evidence. The future is recognised as simulation, not treated as a completed fact. The present gains weight again. The body helps because the body is always contemporary. It can carry traces of the past, but its sensations occur now. The pressure of feet on the floor is now. The air moving at the nostrils is now. The hand around a cup is now. These sensations do not solve the past or guarantee the future, but they anchor attention to the only point at which action can occur. A person cannot speak yesterday's boundary or tomorrow's apology. They can act only here. This does not make present sentimental. The present can be painful. It may contain grief, illness, danger, loneliness, regret, or necessary action. But when the present is actually contacted, it often contains more information than the story about it. It contains not only fear but surroundings, not only shame but posture, not only anger but breath, not only loss but the fact that the body is still registering sound, pressure, light and time. The whole moment is usually larger than the thought that names it. In deep distress, the thought often claims totality. This is everything. This will never end. There is no way. The nervous system narrows to survive the intensity. Awareness does not argue abstractly with that claim. It widens the data. It notices one sound, one physical contact, one emotion as emotion, one thought as thought, one possible next action. The world may still be hard, but it is no longer made only of the sentence that arrived first. This is also where memory can begin to change its function. A painful memory may return as proof that the future will repeat the past. With awareness, it can become information about what the nervous system learned. The memory still matters, it still deserves respect, but it does not automatically hold authority over every new situation. It becomes a record, not a ruler. Records are central to this entire journey. In physics, a measurement becomes real for us when a physical record exists, a detector mark, a stored signal, a pattern on a screen. In the mind, a life becomes continuous through memory records, emotional learning, bodily readiness, and narrative. These are different kinds of records, and they must not be collapsed into one another. But both show that what remains from an event can shape what happens next. A quantum measurement record does not require a human story. A psychological record does. The body stores tendencies, but the mind also tells itself what those tendencies mean. I was hurt can become wisdom, or it can become, I will always be hurt. I made a mistake can become learning, or it can become identity. I survived can become quiet strength, or it can become constant preparation for the next disaster. The record matters, but interpretation keeps rewriting its role. This is why healing cannot mean erasing all traces. A trace can be part of intelligence. A person who has known danger may become beautifully sensitive to danger. A person who has known abandonment may become deeply loyal. A person who has known shame may become careful with the dignity of others. The question is whether the trace remains flexible enough to serve life now, or whether it keeps forcing the present to reenact the past. Flexibility is not forgetfulness. It is the ability to update. If the present truly repeats the danger, the organism can protect itself. If the present differs, the organism can learn the difference. Without flexibility, every similar signal becomes identical. With flexibility, similarity is not ignored, but it is investigated. The nervous system stops treating resemblance as proof. This is one of the clearest ways attention changes the lived world. It restores investigation. A believed thought closes the case. A noticed thought opens it. The question is no longer, is my first story real or fake? The question becomes more precise. What information does this thought contain? What history does it carry? What does the body know? What is actually happening? And what response would serve life now? Such investigation is not endless analysis. It is practical. It may take seconds. It may require therapy, conversation, rest, writing, movement, or medical support. It may reveal that the thought is mostly accurate and action is needed. It may reveal that the thought is a memory wearing the present as a mask. It may reveal uncertainty. Even uncertainty is more honest than false certainty when the evidence is incomplete. Science keeps the mystery disciplined. Quantum physics belongs to the microscopic study of states, measurement, amplitudes, interference, and the physical conditions under which certain patterns appear or disappear. Psychology and neuroscience belong to the study of attention, interpretation, emotion, behavior, brain networks, and learning. Contemplative practice belongs to lived investigation of experience from within. These domains can illuminate one another, but they cannot be collapsed into the same explanation without losing precision. That boundary is not a limitation of wonder. It is what protects wonder from becoming confusion. Quantum measurement does not show that thoughts control particles. Mindfulness does not show that consciousness collapses the universe. Neuroplasticity does not mean a person can choose any feeling at will. The stronger claims are not needed. The narrower facts are already enough. Observation, in the psychological sense, can change the role a thought plays in experience. Repeated attention can train the nervous system. Meaning can alter physiology. A pause can change behaviour. The metaphor with quantum observation is therefore useful only if it remains a metaphor. In physics, contact with a measuring apparatus changes what can be observed because information becomes physically encoded. In the mind, contact with a thought through awareness changes what the thought can become because belief is no longer automatic. These are different mechanisms at different levels, but both disturb the lazy idea that observation is always neutral. Contact changes events, not always by command, not with supernatural force, not in the same way across different sciences, but contact matters. The detector that records a path changes the interference pattern. The awareness that notices a thought changes its authority. The parent who pauses before shouting changes the room. The person who names fear before obeying it changes the next step. The friend who asks instead of accuses changes the available conversation. None of this makes the observer a ruler outside life. The observer is part of the process. In human experience, awareness is not a detached witness floating above the body. It arises through the living system itself. The brain notices its own activity. The body reports its state. Attention shifts. Interpretation loosens. Action changes. Then the changed action becomes new experience, and new experience becomes part of learning. There is no escape from causality here. There is a more complex layer of causality becoming visible. This matters because some spiritual-sounding language accidentally creates a full split. Awareness as pure and life as messy, the witness as elevated and emotion as lower. But the actual process is more integrated. Awareness is valuable precisely because it enters the mess. It notices the racing heart, the hard thought, the old wound, the impulse to defend, the wish to be loved, the shame of needing anything at all. It does not float above these things. It makes room for them to be known without being instantly obeyed. The simplest moments reveal this best. A body sits or lies down. The breath moves unevenly. Somewhere outside, a door closes or a vehicle passes. The mind produces a sentence about tomorrow. Another sentence answers it. A fragment of memory appears. A sensation in the stomach changes. None of this is extraordinary. Yet if it is noticed as it happens, the moment is not completely captured by the commentary. The commentary becomes part of the field, not the owner of it. The silence before thought was never destroyed. It was often covered. The mind speaks so quickly that the space around the speech goes unnoticed. When a thought appears, it makes ripples. When believed completely, the ripples can seem like a storm that belongs to the entire lake. When seen clearly, they remain ripples, real, moving, meaningful, but not the whole water. That image should not be made too perfect. Some storms are large. Some thoughts are not light. Some nervous systems carry weather that cannot be softened by one breath. There are pains that require help, protection, medicine, community, justice, and time. Awareness is not a universal cure. It is not a replacement for care. It is a way of meeting experience that can prevent the first interpretation from becoming a prison every time. The humility of that claim is part of its strength. It does not promise permanent peace. It does not promise a mind without stories. The human mind will keep predicting, remembering, protecting, desiring, fearing, loving, and naming. The body will keep reacting. Old patterns will return, sometimes quietly, sometimes with force. But the return of a pattern does not mean the pattern is the whole truth. It means life has offered another moment in which seeing may happen. What is scientifically firm remains firm. Quantum superposition, measurement, and decoherence belong to quantum physics. Metacognition, emotional regulation, attention, and neuroplasticity belong to psychology and neuroscience. Philosophical questions about consciousness remain open where evidence has not settled them. The practical conclusion does not need exaggeration to be profound. The way a person meets a thought can change the quality of the moment that follows. A thought appears. It has tone, speed, pressure, and direction. It offers a world. This means danger. This means failure. This means rejection. This means I am alone. Before it becomes the entire world, it can sometimes be seen. In that seeing, no alternate universe has to open. Something more immediate opens, a different relationship to this body, this breath, this person, this pain, this next word. The mystery resolves only softly. The mind does not create reality from nothing, and it does not passively receive reality without shaping it. It participates, it predicts, interprets, remembers, tightens, opens, repeats, and learns. A thought believed without being seen can become a world small enough to suffer inside. A thought seen clearly can remain part of the weather, while the larger sky stays present. And in that larger space, the ordinary life continues, not perfect, not finally solved, but less imprisoned by the first sentence that appears.